Thanks, Andy. All right, we're going to give it a couple more minutes for a few more to jump in here, and we'll get started. So thanks, everyone, for joining us. Hopefully we can get through this and you guys have some lessons this afternoon or playing some golf with a bonus day here in the Midwest.
Yeah, Logan, it's actually warmer in the Midwest than it is in Los Angeles today. It's so unheard of.
Yeah. Well, it might snow like next week. I think it was less than 7 days ago. We had like 4 or 5 inches of snow on the ground. So
yeah, I saw some pictures. It looked like perfect sledding environment.
Yep. I actually slipped and fell. With my dog. So all righty, we'll go ahead and get started. So I want to thank Allison for being here. As you guys probably read on her bio and the signups, Allison is a dual PGA Master and LPGA Master professional. She next year is on the 100th year of the Southern California section. She's going to be the first female president, which is a big accomplishment for her. So, you know, as far as her PGA status, she's well accomplished. I would still say as a young professional, and we thank her for being here. But today, Allison's going to more talk in the golf psychology. She has her doctorate in sports psychology. Is that right, Allison?
Yes.
Yes. So she has her doctorate. So she's going to be presenting more how golf psychology and the strategies for club golfers who we see every day. So she works with some elite golfers as well, but this is going to probably more help us with who we see every day. So Allison, you can take it from here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Logan. It is truly an honor to promote and present to the Gateway section because I am born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri. And I'll share a little bit of my PGA background. My very first golf lesson when I was 7 years of age was with Paul Montano. And then as my family moved to Whitmore Country Club, had lessons from Neil Hilke and Russ Ludloff. And then my primary PGA coach from middle school up through college and beyond was and still is with Brian Main, who's very close and near and dear to my family. So I see many familiar names on the attendee list, so it's exciting to share some information about golf psychology for the club golfer, because I feel that most everyone on the call has a really great toolbox to fix slices and fix hooks, but a lot of our students need to have some more in-depth tools on how to perform. And the education that I find out there for golf professionals is a little underserved when it comes to golf psychology. So I love talking about this topic and just basically helping people play their best golf. So let's get started. Some of the topics we're going to include today are what we call in sports psychology the Big Five. And the Big Five can apply to all different types of sports. And so I've adapted a lot of the concepts for golf and golf performance. One of my areas of specialty is anxiety and athletic traumas. And so I'm going to weave that into the sports psychology because oftentimes our students come to us with a lot of baggage and a lot of history of things that have happened on the course and in performance that make them feel unsettled, make them feel nervous, make them feel fearful. And I'll share a little bit of how I use my psychology background to help them overcome that. And also I'm going to weave within the presentation some practical tools that you can add to your toolbox. So hopefully you have your notepad ready to write down some of these strategies that you can share as a non-psychotherapist with your students to help them play a bit better. So I want to give you a little bit of context of how I've gotten to this place of golf and psychology. As I mentioned, born and raised in St. Louis, I go back often, love seeing the PGA professionals that had an influence in my world. And as I started to emerge from playing at Florida State University as a full scholarship athlete, I was trying to find where do I fit into this golf world. I did my fair share of what I call fluffing and folding in the golf shop. I feel like I've run maybe over hundreds of golf tournaments, and where I felt the most comfortable and felt like I really influenced people that I worked with was through teaching. As I mentioned, the pros that worked with me, Russ Ludloff and Brian Main, they made teaching fun. They made lessons fun. They made it interesting and the learning process interesting. And so I wanted to bring that to my students, but I wanted to go a step deeper and understand what really drove the student, what things in their history, day-to-day life might influence their learning process and what happens on the golf course. So that led me to go back to school and earn my master's and then eventually my doctorate in clinical psychology. And I focused on clinical psychology because, frankly, we all know golfers are crazy, right? But I really wanted to understand some influences like depression and anxiety and trauma and how that influences those students. Within the state of California, I became a licensed psychotherapist. So, what my day essentially looks like is teaching by day. And then when I come home at night, I run a private practice. I have a variety of different athletes that I work with. I'm actually a licensed therapist for an Olympic team that practices here in Los Angeles, synchronized swimming, now known as artistic swimming. What I notice with Olympians is very similar to what happens with our club golfers. So as I'm teaching and coaching during the day at Wood Ranch Golf Club as the director of instruction, then I race home at night and I run my private practice where I work with a bunch of different athletes on performance and different avenues of performance. And this has really helped me bridge the world of golf and psychology, where it's created a unique business practice for me and allowed me to be a national speaker and to share with my peers, share some of the things that I've learned to help my students play a bit better. When you think about yourself as a coach and the toolbox that you currently have on technology, how to fix slices, ground reaction forces, increasing speed, there's so much education out there regarding how to get better as a coach in those disciplines. But what really is there out there when it comes to some of these common issues that impact our students' performances? Now, I want you to think about this presentation not only for yourself as a coach with club golfers, but also as a player. Something that I still pride myself on is being really actively engaged in competition. As a club professional, I've played in 2 PPCs and 7 LPGA majors. So I actually use a lot of these fundamentals and concepts to help me play my best. But I want you to think about this presentation sort of from that trifecta. If you still currently play, you sharing your ideas with your students as well. So when we look at this list of the common things students might bring to us, they're going to have adverse events that occur to them on the golf course. Embarrassing moments, top shots, shanks, scoring a 12, choking. There's also going to be issues with communication, maybe between you and a student, maybe if you coach high school teams, the dynamics that go amongst the players or college teams. And then if you have elite players, what's the communication like between caddies and players? Goal setting. It seems so simple that we just set a goal, but there's really a clear science on how to set goals that help us stay motivated and avoid burning out. And then when you talk to your students, I bet a lot of them just go to the range and hit balls. I call that exercise, not really practice. Going to the range and having a clear intention and having a clear task that we'd want to accomplish fits within that goal setting component. Overthinking and over-analysis. We certainly know the the paralysis by analysis. How do we help our students control their mind to think in the right way about the right things so they can play their best? If we could bottle self-confidence and sell it to our students, we'd all be millionaires. But self-confidence is this thing that I feel students are constantly seeking. Like, if I just felt more confident, I could win this tournament. If I just felt more confident, I'd be able to play in the ladies' 9-holers. Self-confidence is actually a skill that we're going to learn today. Concentration. We are faced with so many distractions in our common world. I'm going to be vying for your focus and concentration over the next 2 hours. Super easy to check your email, look at a text message, shop on Amazon. Our students are experiencing that as well. Go to the range at 3 o'clock after school has let out. All the high schoolers and middle schoolers are practicing. And how many have their device in their hand, TikToking, Instagramming, listening to music? So what are some of the tools that you might be able to help teach your students on how to improve the skill of concentration and focus. Handling adversity, grit, being able to swallow the tough stuff when it happens on the golf course. Looking at anxiety-based disorders, whether it's clinical anxiety or pre-performance anxiety. And then finally, something that we all might be experiencing as PGA of America golf professionals, stress and work-life management. How do we take things that are happening in our personal life and maybe compartmentalize them and put it to the side, process them so that we can be present and be available to our students in the moment? How can we play our best golf when we know that we've got 7 lessons the next day? All of these components, when you look at these common issues, these are what our students are coming to us at the lesson tee with, not just learning how to make great contact. We talk
Hey,
about
Allison, real
that.
quick.
Yes.
Hey, is there anybody we need to let in? And then also, if anybody has any questions for Allison throughout the presentation, please throw them in the chat. Thanks, Allison.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. No one's in the waiting room, so we are good to go. I see we are good. Okay. So in the big 5 of sports psychology, these are going to be your basic fundamentals. Perhaps you teach grip, alignment, and posture on day 1 with a brand new student. In sports psychology, we talk about emotional regulation. So the different emotions that we experience in a given round. Sometimes the given emotions that we experience in one hole. How are we as human beings able to manage this? Attention and concentration, goal setting, imagery and visualization. This is sort of not taken as in depth with a lot of students because it seems so easy. Oh yeah, I just image my shot or I just mentally rehearse. But there's some fabulous science to indicate how powerful this is in improving your motor patterns, but improving your on-course performance. And then self-talk, which ties into confidence, the things that we say to ourselves, our self-schemas, and our narratives. So let's dig in. Like, do you really know what emotions are? I mean, we experience them, we have them any given moment, but like, what really are emotions? Sometimes people feel emotions like happen to us, but they're actually created by the brain. Emotions are pieces of information, and the brain will create and pick the emotion that it deems that you're supposed to feel based on the environment, what's happening in the environment, and based on your history. So if my brain knows that in the past, when I hit a shot to 5 feet, I typically am going to feel happiness and joy. When that happens in real life, then my brain is going to say, let's run the pattern for happiness and joy. Let's feel that emotion. Sometimes the emotion feels so automatic, like anger. Someone cuts you off in traffic, or you hook one out of bounds, and all of a sudden, anger all of a sudden races into your body. But the brain is very quickly creating that emotion. It's also basically predicting what you might feel in the future. So if you were to have a hole in one, it's going to take all that information and predict, oh, Allison should feel elation. And so that prediction is a little tricky because sometimes it might predict the wrong emotion when we are able to regulate and choose a different path. Let me explain a little bit more what that means. If we look at this cycle of emotions on the slide, we have a golf shot that is created. So let's say I top my drive. Okay, so a top drive is created, and my brain is now going to take all the information and say, wow, this is an LPGA Monday qualifier. I've spent 32 years practicing the game of golf. How many times have I really topped in my life? Not a lot. And all this information says Allison should feel really angry. So the brain is going to create the emotion of anger. When that emotion starts moving through my body, my conscious brain is now going to interpret the emotion. So my conscious brain, which tends to be more of your prefrontal cortex, which is the brain part right behind your eyes. This is the executive functioning area of your brain that is determining what club to use, how to respond to a social situation. It's basically sort of dictating how we behave in life. So my brain is going to pick up that anger emotion and it's going to say, oh, wow, Allison is going to feel anger. So let's go ahead and make her heart beat faster. Let's flush her cheeks. Let's have her be a little bit shaky in the hands because she's just so mad at what just happened. So all of this now creates a behavior. Maybe I slam my club, or I put my club back into my bag really forcefully, or maybe I turn that anger inward and I get really quiet and my body language changes. When we look at this cycle, there's some opportunities for us to jump in and teach our students how we can interfere with that cycle so it doesn't have to become complete. We can't really jump in front of the creation of the emotion because the brain is going to do that. Where we can jump in is in this conscious area of changing the interpretation of the emotion. Once anger is created in my brain, I can choose to interpret it as information. And I can choose to say, wow, I need to be a bit more focused. Or maybe I should work on my breathing to make sure my nervous system is a bit calmer so that I can create a better motor pattern the next time I hit this tee shot. I also have the opportunity to jump in between the interpretation and the physical sensation. So when my body starts to have a racing heart rate or my breathing becomes shallow, I have conscious control over how to change that. I can breathe slower to then influence my heart rate. I can do some progressive muscle relaxation to take the tension out of my muscles and allow me to become a little bit more relaxed. Certainly, we spend a lot of time here before behavior. So we teach our juniors not to throw golf clubs. We teach them not to slam the club into the ground. But if we're focusing our time on the behavior, we're missing two critical pieces on how they can really manage the emotion, the interpretation, and the physical sensation. Now, here's an interesting fact as coaches. We have a part in our brain called the amygdala. It's deep down in the center of our brain, and it's responsible for a lot of our emotional regulation. In fact, it's sort of a container for the feeling component of memories. So if you think back to the birth of your first child, a wedding, your 21st birthday, you think about those memories, and all of a sudden you have some feelings that come up. The amygdala is the container for those emotions. When you're in a golf lesson, your amygdala can pick up the emotion of another person within 33 milliseconds, and it can influence us to feel the exact same way. So you might have experienced being in a round of golf, maybe in one of your section events, someone's having an awful day, they're super angry, and all of a sudden that kind of bleeds and leaks into your attitude and your behavior. When you're in a golf lesson, sometimes you can feel the frustration of your student. Maybe they're just continually topping the golf ball, no matter what improvement strategy you provide them, they're just quite not getting it. You can start to feel their frustration as well, and that's going to be from the power of the amygdala. So aerified greens, we've all experienced that. We tend to aerify here in the springtime. So if I was a little guy and I'm on aerified greens and I make a putt, I'm going to feel like a rock star. And of course, if we make a close putt, we naturally as human beings want to challenge ourselves. So let's say we put the golf ball just a little farther away. And we try again, but oh, how many times have you ended up farther away than what you've started? This is a perfect example of the inability to regulate emotions. Hopefully you're not experiencing this behavior on your aerified greens where we're throwing a temper tantrum, but I think this is a very cute and interesting perspective on how we experience emotions as human beings. And as adults, we have a better toolbox to regulate those emotions. But as a young individual, they experience the emotion and have little capacity to control that emotional and the behavior. So one of the most common emotions and experiences that my students will talk to me about is pre-performance anxiety, nervousness, and anxiety in general. Anxiety and nerves are actually two different things. Anxiety is going to be more of the clinical biological component of the experience, and nervousness is going to be more of the psychological experience. So what really is anxiety and nerves? Well, it is your brain's ability to protect you. We have what's called a fight, flight, and freeze mechanism, and it helps keep you safe. We go back to prehistoric times, and it's a saber-toothed tiger running after you and you trying to find cover so that you survive. It's your ability to learn after you've touched a hot stove. Wow, that really hurt. I'm going to learn from this and not touch a hot stove again. These experiences throughout your day will help try to keep you living in perpetuity. So that mechanism, though, has a couple of choices. You can fight what you're experiencing. You can run away, which we call flight, or you can shut down, which is called freeze. You want to be able to ask your students when they're experiencing anxiety or nervousness, what does this look like in you? If you could describe what the experience is like, what adjectives would you write down? When does it start? Is it a day before the tournament? Is it walking to the first tee? Is it a week before the event? I remember playing in my first LPGA Tour major. It was called the Wegmans LPGA Championship at the time. I started feeling nervous like 2 to 3 weeks ahead of time because my mind was going into all of the what ifs, what might happen, what does this look like? So we call that pre-performance anxiety. Before the performance happens, if you're experiencing that nervousness, that uncomfortableness, we call that pre-performance. If it's happening in the middle of performance, such as you're just having a bomb round, you've got 8 birdies on the card, this is going to be your career low, and you're playing in the section championship qualifying for PPC, and you've got 3 holes left, you might start to feel some performance anxiety. So you want to ask your students, what does this look like? When does it start? If you could describe it through the physical senses and the psychological senses, draw me a picture of what that's like. And it's important for us to talk about pressure because a lot of our students, particularly high schoolers and middle schoolers, may be feeling tons of pressure, internal and external. External pressure might be their parents wanting them to play in a certain amount of AJGA events to earn stars, or they want them to go to this particular college. They might want to get a 32 on the ACT so they get the Bright Flight Scholarship. There's all these different pressures that a student could perceive. And then we have internal pressure, wanting to do the best for you, putting pressure on yourself to win events, score low, hit great shots in front of your friends. The interesting thing about pressure is that there really is no such thing as pressure on you. Of course, we have air that's pushing on us, but when we think about pressure, it's really expectations. If we could change that word pressure and talk about expectations, that could feel a little bit different. So the expectations that I set for myself or a parent sets for their junior can tend to create some of this anxiety and pre-performance anxiety. Where does anxiety really come from? Well, we have some biological situations, we have some situational, and we have some conditioned situations. Biological would be my neurochemistry creates anxiety, and some people are born that way. We have situational, like I might be nervous every time I have a 3-foot putt because I have a history of missing 3-foot putts. We have conditioned, such as I might go into a tournament with no fear at all when I'm 7 years old, but over time I might learn as I'm a teenager or an adult, tournaments are scary, tournaments are uncomfortable because I'm not performing the way that I would like to. What's interesting about anxiety is that it's not dangerous. There's no record in the world of someone actually dying from anxiety or a panic attack. It doesn't happen. It feels like you're going to die. It feels like it's dangerous, but you actually will never die from a panic attack. In fact, the science of a panic attack or an anxiety moment is about 20 minutes from start to finish, which is really interesting because for those that take medication for panic disorder, the medication doesn't kick in till about 20 minutes after they've taken it. Very interesting with that. Where are some of the sources? Well, we have a particular skill set, and then we have an expectation from the environment. So let's say I'm a 15 handicapper, and all of a sudden I get paired into a pro-am where there's no net event. So I'm now having to count my gross score. That environment is demanding more from my skill set than what I'm able to bring. That can create anxiety. the history of our failures and embarrassment, the fear of the unknown, as I mentioned, what might happen, or me thinking into the future, what this tournament might look like. And then a big one for our club golfers can be performing in front of others. I hear this a lot from higher handicappers, and particularly some of the women students that I teach, is hitting a poor shot in front of a friend or hitting a poor shot in front of a women's group. When the anxiety and the panic become too overwhelming for the brain and the nervous system, it can lead to choking, which is performing much more poorly than you would given your skill set. I remember playing in a golf tournament and having a pretty fair round, and all of a sudden I hooked one out of bounds, and the anxiety started to fill me, and I hooked my next shot out of bounds, and I hit my third one out of bounds. And all of a sudden you're standing on the tee box and you're like, I don't know what to do. Like, how do I just keep this on the golf course? I finished with a 12 on that particular hole. I was able to use some emotional regulation tools to sort of decompress after that. And then I was able to birdie the next hole. So I had a nice bounce back effect, but that choking moment, performing much more poorly than I would ever expect myself, that can create sort of some scar tissue within our mind. Some of the physical sensations of anxiety that your students might talk to you about, or what you might experience, could be muscle tightness or shaking, trembling of those muscles. We might even see that exacerbate into some yips. Erratic rhythm, where all of a sudden the tempo is like, oh, I was way too fast on that swing, or I rushed transition. Over time, being in an anxious state creates fatigue and tiredness because your nervous system is amped up, running on high. Of course, shallow breathing and a rapid heart rate almost creates a little bit of a hyperventilation type experience. You're not getting enough oxygen in, the exchange of CO2 isn't being created. All of a sudden, the heart is trying to pump faster. The psychological symptoms of anxiety are the feeling of overwhelm, panic. I'm fearful. I'm worrying about the future. I'm worrying about what happened in the past. I'm worrying about what might occur now. And just feeling that rushed sensation, like I need to hurry to my ball, maybe I'm holding my group back. These are some of the things that your students will sneak into their conversations with you. And if you have a fine-tuned ear, you start picking up on these words, you can sense that they might be experiencing some anxiety. So what do we do with this? This is the first tool to add into your toolbox, is to develop with your students a self-awareness of what the emotion feels like. How does it show up in you? I have an emotion chart that has a little over like 80 or 90 emotions, and they're categorized by themes. And I'll pull that up on the screen as I'm working with a student, and I'm like, look at all these choices of emotions that you could experience. Can you name it? Can you describe where it's at? Can you describe when this happens? And we notice that a lot of our students tend to stick to the core 5 emotions of like sadness, happiness, joy, depression, anxiety. Once we develop a self-awareness of what the emotion looks like in you, what does anger look like in you? Now we can do something with it. We can decrease physical tension. We can decrease and regulate your heart rate. You are always in control of your heart rate, and that is through your breath. Finally, we need to psychologically reframe what the emotion means to us. So, what does anger mean to me? Does it mean that I'm not good enough? Does it mean that I didn't practice as much? Does it mean that I set an expectation for myself and I'm disappointed that I haven't met that? In order to regulate the emotion, we can use this 5-step process to really contain it. And I put up there, anger is 1 letter away from danger, because I find that a lot of students will experience either happiness, frustration, anxiety, or anger. Those are like the top 4 that a lot of my students will talk to me about. And anger is when that student is trying to do something and they just can't quite get it, or they have an expectation that they should be doing something. And that word should is so detrimental. So anger is just that 1 letter away from danger, because if you are in an anger state, you're going to tend to underperform. Whatever emotion you're experiencing, the first step is to locate where that emotion is being sensed and felt in your body. So if we take anger for a moment, where would you feel anger in your body if you hooked one out of bounds on the first tee of your section championship? Some people might feel anger in their jaw, in their chest, in their throat, in their shoulders. So locate where it is in your body. The next step is try to identify a color that best represents the emotion that you're experiencing. So with anger, we might pick a red, an orange, maybe a spectrum of red and orange. Once we have a color assigned to it, now put a shape to it. What would this emotion represent in terms of a shape? Could it be like a spiky amoeba? Could it be something with triangles, something that's rectangular? So we have a location, a color, and a shape. Now we're going to name it. You can certainly name it the emotion, anger, or you can come up with a silly name. I've had a student who just named it Shank because they were so upset every time they hazel shanked it. So once you have a name, location, color, and a shape, you can actually do something with it. You have this mental image of where this thing is located. It's not just happening to you. You are now in control. You own it by breathing it out of your body. So by using some imagery, when you have this red triangle that I'm going to call anger that's hanging out in my chest, I can imagine using some slow breaths to push it out and have it exhale through my mouth and through my nose. When you get really good at this, you can do these steps very, very quickly, and it can help you in situations outside of coaching golf and performing in golf. Someone cuts you off in traffic later today, and maybe you just want to throw up the middle finger and slam on the horn because I can't believe that person cut me off. Find where it is in your body, color it, shape it, name it, do something with it. Maybe you're having a really tough day at work and your boss has said something and put some more responsibilities on you, and it just makes you feel really belittled and really small and frustrated. Before you say something or you type that nasty email, use this process to help you compose yourself and find control over the emotion you're experiencing. Another tool to add to your toolbox is controlling your breath. And in this systematic way, we call this box breathing. So with this image, we see that we can breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, exhale for 4, hold again for 4. So while you're sitting at your desks, let's go ahead and try this together. We're going to breathe in for 4, hold for 4, exhale, hold for 4. It's pretty amazing how quickly you can compose yourself. You can create that interference before saying something that you put your foot in your mouth or saying something you regret. I've certainly used this when I've been in maybe a conflicting conversation and I just want to attack because I'm so angry because things aren't fair, things aren't right. And so using this just allows me an opportunity to compose that emotion and then to think a bit more clearly. I'll share with this kind of an interesting brain model that shows when we become overwhelmed, how we have an inability to think clearly. So this could be a bad shot on the golf course and you try to hit the hero shot, or you rush through your pre-shot routine so that you can just get it back out into play. So I'm going to use my hand as an example. So if we look at this in terms of a brain model, my wrist going into my hand is going to represent the spinal cord going into the brain. If I tuck my thumb inside my palm, this is going to represent the limbic system, which is your emotional control house of your brain. My thumbnail is going to represent the amygdala, that is that emotional container that we talked about. When I wrap my fingers over my thumb, we create a cortex. That's all the wrinkly part of your brain. And you'll notice that the limbic system is deep down in the middle of that brain. Well, the cortex is responsible for interpreting what's happening in the outside world, making decisions. And when I turn my brain to the side, the front of my knuckles here, that's that prefrontal cortex that we mentioned in the beginning. That's the executive functioning system that helps me pick the right club, that helps me put the ball back in my stance when I want to hit it low into the wind. When something happens that overwhelms our nervous system and exceeds our capacity to cope in the moment, we essentially become overwhelmed and we flip our lid. When we flip our lid, we put our foot in our mouth, we say the wrong things, we make the wrong choices on the golf course. We make a bunch of mistakes because we're not thinking clearly. The emotional component of the experience is so overwhelming, our conscious brain can't gain control, except we use box breathing or we use that emotional regulation technique. It creates the interference to allow us to be able to think a bit more clearly. Now, back in 2020, when we were all experiencing a little bit of lockdown and some COVID, the Masters tournament was impacted and it was pushed back to like October, November of that particular year. And it was kind of interesting to watch the Masters tournament later on in the year because the colors of the trees were all different. And lo and behold, Tiger gets to play. And I remember watching on Sunday afternoon, watching him play and playing pretty good. I think he was like 3 under going into 13. And then some of you may remember that this happened. So we have the notorious 13. First shot, hits the green, rolls back in. We see that a lot, so not necessarily a big deal, but now we have shot number 2. A little too much backspin. And now it goes into the water once again. Compilation skips over the 3rd shot, but the 3rd shot goes over into the bunker, hits it too long into the water again. I want you to notice how Tiger composes himself. No club slamming. There's no body language to indicate, oh my gosh, I suck. Very calm, cool, and collected. We know inside, I'm sure he's very upset, but just sort of notice the care and diligence, even tapping in this small putt, walking around people's lines, even having the time to tap down some spike marks here in a moment. He finished with a 10. It was the biggest number I had ever seen Tiger make live on TV. If you recall what happened in the next several holes, he went on a birdie train. So having a 10 on one particular hole, composing himself with maturity, professionalism, and some of these tools, we know that his mother had a very Eastern influence into his spirituality and his upbringing for his mindset. He was able to bounce back and go on a birdie streak there to finish with pretty respectable score for having a 10. So with that being said, we think about all the different things that can happen on the golf course. I'm curious, when you think about your performance over the course of your career, have you ever experienced a distressing memory about a failure on the golf course? Have you ever experienced a dream about that failed performance or a bad hole of it happening again? Have you ever had a flashback, like an image that just pops into your mind unexpectedly at a time that you're not really anticipating it occurring about that poor shot or a sense of it happening again? Have you ever experienced anxiety or nervousness when being in a similar situation as the failed performance? I know that when I played in my 2nd KPMG and my 3rd KPMG, I felt very similar with the amount of anxiety about what I was going to go through. Intrusive thoughts or negative feelings about a poor shot or a failed competition? Have you ever tried to avoid the memory or the thought or the feeling by doing something else to cope? Some people might like excessively talk on the golf course, or they might smoke, or they might drink to try to avoid the feeling of the thing that had happened to them. Maybe you just avoided the situation that reminded you of the failed performance. Like, I'm not going to go to that golf course ever again. I'm never playing that golf course again. I'm never going to play in that tournament again. What's interesting is this is actually the criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder. So if an individual met 5 or more of these components from a clinical situation, we would call that PTSD. But isn't this interesting that all of us as golf pros have experienced at least 1 or 2 of these components on the golf course, maybe in life? So we think about the severity of what our students have gone through, and we can't just coach them out of it by fixing their slice. We can't just coach them out of it by teaching them how to rotate more. We really need to look at the students from an inside out perspective and understand their situation on a deeper level. When we have these situations that we experience on the golf course, they can look like physical and emotional traumas. I call them golf traumas. We might have the physical components such as like a wrist, finger, or hand injury, shoulders and backs. We can have interpretations of hurtful comments from coaches, parents, and mentors. I use this example. I remember working with a top 100 coach, and I was trying to play a bit better in my major tour experiences because it's such a big stage, and super, super nice guy. And I was like really eager to get some insight and some consultation on how I could play better. And at the end of the lesson, he's like, your swing is a lot like Jennifer Song. And I was like, hey, it's kind of interesting. Some of you might be like, who's Jennifer Song? She's probably like 250th on the money list. So we're basically like not in contention on the LPGA tour, and we don't have a tour card. And I was like, oh, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, it's great that you've gotten this far with that swing. And so from the outside, it might be like, okay, that's kind of a compliment in a way. You've gotten this far with that swing. But in a way, it was a major, major dagger to my heart to be like, I've gotten this far with that swing. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe my swing isn't good enough. And that created a little bit of scar tissue for me in my belief system. So we want to be super careful about the comments that we make to our students because they may interpret them as being hurtful, which could be an emotional trauma for them. Hitting shots that are egregiously offline. I've had clients that have hit a shank and it's been so egregious where it almost hit another person or it did hit another person, and they become so fearful of having to be in that situation again. Choking on the final hole of a very important tournament. I remember being in the Missouri High School State Championship. It was my senior year. There was a lot of conversation about, Allison has a good chance of winning. And I was winning on the last round of the last day. And I got to the 18th hole and double bogeyed to finish in second place. That would be a choking moment that was important to me that created some golf trauma. And for players shooting a higher than usual score after a really solid round. So our players that go 70 the first day, 85 the next day. These experiences from a physical and an emotional way can be really detrimental to a player, and it can start to accumulate over time where it creates performance barriers. The brain is certainly capable of processing stressful life events. It does so every single day. You might be stressed at work. You talk it out when you walk your dog at night. You feel better about the situation. The next day you learn from it. You have a nice day. However, there are certain times where a traumatic event, whether it's in life or in the golf course, is so overwhelming for the nervous system that it essentially becomes stuck in your brain. And that stuck memory is what triggers us and creates a physical reaction in present time. When you think about PTSD and some of our maybe PGA Hope veterans, they've served in war, and maybe the backfiring of a car or the slamming of a car door creates a impulse, a reaction to that sound. That is a PTSD response. If I have hit a shank in a tournament that was so embarrassing and so overwhelming for my nervous system, and that trauma memory becomes stuck, when I now get into a like or similar situation, my body is going to respond the exact same way as what it did in the trauma. Now, of course, there's tons of events that occur on the golf course that are embarrassing and you'd like to forget, and you don't seem to respond that way. That's good. That means that your brain has processed it in a productive way. But there are those rare moments where Those embarrassing moments become too overwhelming for the brain process. Most of our memory is stored in short-term memory for about 30 seconds. And if your brain deems it as being important, you'll store it in long-term memory. If your brain is like, I don't need to remember that I buttered my toast this morning for breakfast, then my brain can go ahead and discard it. Our perception of the importance of golf events is what we attune to. So if I had 72 shots in a particular round and one duck hook, I may fail to remember my 71 awesome shots and attune all of my attention to that one duck hook because it created a bigger emotional experience because of the negativity of the brain wanting to hold on to that experience to try to protect me to avoid it from ever happening again. These memories are created from all five senses, what we see, what we felt, what we heard, what we tasted, all in that moment. And our body is going to try to store this memory to learn from it, to protect me from it ever happening again. But what's interesting is when it's trying to protect me from happening again, I just continue to manifest it happening again. So it's like, I don't hit it in the water, don't hit it in the water, don't hit it in the water. Where do you hit it? In the water. It's what our brain attunes to. We also hold on to our physical and our emotional trauma in the same way. The brain cannot differentiate between the two. So the words that were said to me that perhaps hurt my feelings, that's going to be experienced in the same way as if I sprained my ankle while I was running in a canyon. So our brain holds the fear and the scariness of that in a very similar way. You can get a sense of where your student is at in their experience of emotion and trauma based on some of the things that they say and how their nervous system is regulating itself. So we have parasympathetic and sympathetic systems within our nervous system. And we sort of say parasympathetic is rest and digest. It's you getting enough recovery, sleeping enough, feeling like you're making gains and progress, not feeling fatigue after a workout or having an intense practice session. You feel rested, you feel alert, you feel in a good place. So that's when the nervous system is really low key and very mild. When we add in a little bit of attention and focus, we're now in what's called a flow state, when you're completely engaged in the moment, when you're in an optimal performance place, when time either passes slowly or fast, but you're completely engaged and little disruptions may not interfere with you. Your students may say, like, I've got this, I'm really prepared, I'm ready to go, I'm excited to compete. If the nervous system becomes a little bit more dysregulated and a little too overwhelming, we might start to teeter into this fight or flight response. We can still adequately perform here, but you may hear some things from your students like, I feel like I just can't perform well anymore. Or I'm so mad that my coach didn't put me into the lineup. Or my swing coach just isn't listening to me when I'm telling him that I just want to stop hooking the golf ball. I just don't know if I can do this anymore. But you can still perform in an okay place here. When the nervous system becomes so overwhelmed and we have these continual, perpetual experiences, I just seem to always fail in every tournament. I just seem to never be able to hit this shot straight. This is going to be tapping into the sympathetic nervous system where we are freezing. We're experiencing yips, might call it balks. You've heard of Rick Ankiel from the St. Louis Cardinals, who couldn't throw a pitch anymore and had to reinvent himself as an outfielder because he essentially had pitching yips. The student might feel just tired all the time, demotivated, they're just going through the motions, and they might also have a high experience of injuries. When you can take these statements and start to attune to your student and what they're telling you, you can understand and start to predict what their nervous system is experiencing and then help them be able to cope with some of those experiences. So if you don't really have a concept of what athletic traumas look like yet, or golf traumas, I should say, I've created a little bit of a compilation, some of the PGA Tour and LPGA Tour moments of what a golf trauma. So we see quite a mix of different responses to those experiences. Some of those players kind of laughed it off. We see Jason Day at the end, like, can't believe I just did that. Probably recovered quite nicely. And then we look at Jordan Spieth and his experience on 13 and at the Masters, and what happened in that particular year when he was leading the tournament and had a big number. And then you look at his results on that particular hole the next year, and the same exact thing happened. So certainly there was some scar tissue and some trauma that was experienced there. Within the field of golf trauma, before we get into attention and concentration, you've got some tools that you can start to share with your students in terms of regulating emotions and breathing. From a clinical aspect, a lot of the clients that I work with, they'll come to see me for a technique that I'm trained in called EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And it essentially helps the brain unstuck the memory, the traumatic memory, so that the student doesn't have to feel that physiological response in the moment. Something that has happened maybe 15, 20 years ago that's still resonating in someone's mind. Through EMDR, I can help them overcome that. And one of the studies that I've published is looking at 2 LPGA professional golfers, their perceived traumas and their level of confidence and anxiety, pre-treatment and post-treatment with EMDR, and how their anxiety decreased and how their confidence increased after they were able to overcome that trauma through that psychological technique. Okay, so now as we move into attention and concentration, again, I have been holding hopefully your attention for the past 54 minutes, and knowing that there's a lot of distractions that come into your world at any given time, how are we able to focus on the right thing at the right time? We have so many visual obstacles on the golf course with water, out of bounds, bunkers, trees. We have our playing partners and competitors. I remember working with a student who was very sensitive to sound. And anytime any of the women in her group made a sound like an iron touched another iron, or there was a little bit of rattling, digging into a golf bag, she just completely freaked out. So we have to deal with the noises from our playing partners and competitors. Crowds and spectators standing on the first tee at a major tournament, seeing grandstands, TV cameras. The fairway looks about this big because it's lined with people, and you just hope that you don't hit any one of those. That becomes an attention hijacker. Of course, the experience of emotion, anxiety and nervousness, that can hijack our attention. And then sounds, and we'll talk a little bit about music. So I ask my students, like, where are you? Are you in the future? Are you thinking ahead 2 or 3 holes from now? Are you in the past thinking about the 3-putt that you just had, or the 3 birdie putts that you made that you should have made? Mindfulness is doing one thing at one time and knowing that you're doing it. And that is one of the antidotes to attention and concentration deficits. I'll say the definition again because I find it so valuable. Mindfulness is doing one thing at one time and knowing that you're doing it. It means when you took a shower this morning and you were under warm water and you had all these wonderful scents of soap, you were thinking about what time you need to jump on the seminar. You were thinking, what's my lesson book look like this afternoon? What emails do I have to shoot out? And what am I going to eat for breakfast? That's doing like 5 things at once. Or when you're eating dinner tonight and you're watching Netflix and you're talking to your spouse and your family and you're checking in and you're eating while you're on Instagram, that's 5 things at once. That's what a lot of our society does now is we multitask and we think that we're so successful at multitasking, but really we absolutely suck at it. Because when you multitask, you are half-assing all the pieces that you're engaged in. So when your student is listening to music or a podcast and practicing and working on some motor patterns, they're being distracted in all those different components. They're not listening to the podcast, they're not focusing on the motor pattern, and they're not engaged in the practice. So we want to ask our students, where is your attention when you're practicing or when you're on the golf course? How engaged do you feel? So I'm going to test your attention and concentration right now. This is called the monkey business illusion. There'll be some directions that appear on the screen. So you're looking for players in white and how many times they pass a ball. Okay, so in your chat box right now, I'll be able to see who's paying attention. I want you to write down in the chat, type in the number, how many times the players in white passed the ball. We've got 18, 16, 16, 16, 14, 16, and a 17. Pretty good. Well, I have to give it up to my coach, Brian Main, and my friend Barbara for being attentive. The answer is 16. However, did any of you see the monkey or the gorilla that passed through? And did any of you see the curtain in the background changing colors? So as we review it again, so there's the gorilla. We see a red curtain changing to orange and then changing to a yellowish gold. So what's interesting about this is when you are someone who can engage in one thing at one time and you can be singularly focused, you get the answer of 16, you don't see the gorilla, you don't see the curtain change, you have a higher opportunity to get into flow states because you have that capacity to be engaged and enmeshed in one thing. If you maybe miscounted and you saw the gorilla and you were distracted and the curtain changing, you're taking in a lot of sensory input. And in a way, that can be good for coaching because we don't want to maybe necessarily get so fixated on club face. We want to see how the body's responding to club face or how the shaft movement is related to weight shift and pressure shifting. You might be looking at multiple things at once. However, when you're performing and you're trying to get into a flow state, being able to go from a broad attention to a very narrow attention allows you to access that flow state and to be attuned and focused in the moment. Some ways for us to build the skill of attention and concentration can come from cue words. So we might come up with a mantra or a one-word inspirational statement that allows us to get back into the present moment. We certainly know when we're playing a round of golf, you don't have to concentrate the entire 4 hours, 4.5 hours. That is nearly impossible. We know science tells us that, particularly in a learning environment like right now, I'm going to get about 20 minutes of good concentration from you, and then you're going to start to fatigue and teeter out. That's why attention breaks are very helpful. If I were to use a word or a cue word to bring me back into the present moment, I can then snap myself back into being focused. One of the words I like to use a lot is win, W-I-N, and that stands for me, what's important now. So if I'm finding myself becoming distracted, either in a lesson or when I'm on the golf course, when I say the word win, it's asking my brain a question to say, what's important right now? Let's get back into the present moment. Developing effective routines allows our nervous system to be comfortable and calm. That's why pre-shot and post-shot routines are absolutely helpful. Think about your morning routine today. You got up, you brushed your teeth, probably at a particular sequence. You took a shower, you maybe used the restroom, then you got ready for the day in terms of clothing. Then maybe you ate breakfast. You typically have a morning routine. If you were to skip a step and you're like, oh, shoot, I forgot deodorant today, it kind of throws you off your vibe and your energy for the rest of the day. When you develop an effective routine, it allows your nervous system to feel calm, collected, and helps you focus. Teaching a pre-shot routine that has the same steps over and over allows the individual to feel prepared to hit the shot. I'll provide an example. One time I was asked to be on Golf Channel Live with Susie Whaley when I was at one of the KPMGs, and showing up at 6 a.m., we go live at 6:15, and they throw at me, we're going to talk about hybrids from the rough. Ooh, bluegrass rough that was probably 4.5 inches deep, no practice swings at all, live TV, ball goes in the rough, 4 hybrid in the hand. Let's talk about how to hit this. And then Susie throws one in there. Okay, Allison, let's show us. And in that moment, I instantly went into pre-shot routine. I stood behind, I did what I normally do, and was able to successfully hit the shot. The routine allowed me to be attentive and focused when the task was presented to me. As I mentioned, take attention breaks. If your students are going to have giant practice sessions, or our high schoolers or middle schoolers are like, yeah, I'm going to practice for 3 hours on Saturday, you need to make sure that they take attention breaks, because when the attention starts to falter, the swing pattern is going to falter. It's going to become a little bit more lackadaisical and inattentive. So have them go 20 on, 10 off. 20 minutes on, 10 minutes, go get a drink of water, go to the restroom, rehydrate, look at your phone if you need to, take a break. Keep in mind, though, there is distraction residue. So when you do take that break, it's going to get a little bit challenging to get back into that flow state, because you're going to have to re-engage yourself, but you can do so through with a cue word. We want to make sure that we are redirecting our attention through mindfulness. Our attention is constantly going to be attracted to many things: trees, shiny object, wind, water. How do I go from broad to narrow? And we ask ourselves, what's important right now? What am I feeling right now? What's the grip feel like in my hand? What's the feet feel like on the ground? Can I feel the wind direction on my cheeks? One of the questions that I saw in the chat is, what are some other ways besides mindfulness to besides meditation, what are some mindfulness techniques that you use with golfer? Mindfulness is just attention. And it is knowing that you're doing a particular thing. So I'll have them do a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 exercise. Name 5 things that you see in your environment. Name 4 things that you hear in your environment. Name 3 things that you feel in your environment. 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. You're moving your attention on command to the thing that you want to pay attention to. And again, we want to avoid multitasking. Sometimes we can't do it. Look, I'm the queen of driving to and from work and completing conference calls. It's doing 2 things at once. It's driving and it's communicating. So there's going to be some times that we just can't avoid multitasking. But when it comes to motor learning, when it comes to practice, we want to be as engaged and in tune to the thing that we're doing in the moment as best as we can. So our third component of the Big Five is looking at goal setting. All of you are setting goals with your facility. Maybe they're revenue goals, maybe they're tournament participation goals. When we look at our performance, are your students setting yearly goals? What do they want to accomplish by December 24? What do they want to accomplish in the first quarter? How do you break that down into small segments? I'm sort of a nerd when it comes to goal setting. I really strive. It makes me feel comfortable when I set goals. So at the beginning of the year, I have a notebook. I write down all the things that I want to accomplish, and then I start breaking it down segment by segment. What can I do every day? What can I do every hour that can help me get 1 step closer to that goal? And then I have that long range picture. What do I want life to look like and golf to look like when I'm 50, when I'm 60? If we don't have goals, then we increase the chances of what's called burnout. It's that state of mental and physical exhaustion due to prolonged stress. And that prolonged stress can come from not having a picture in mind of where you want to be. I consider goal setting more of a roadmap. It's what you're going to follow for your success. And even if a student goes to the range to practice for 60 minutes, if they don't have a goal, they have no idea what they're doing. They're just swinging, they're just hitting balls. I call that exercise, not practice. So I encourage my students, let's have a goal for that particular practice session. What are you going to walk away feeling like you have accomplished better? Sometimes we need to get so specific that I request them to write that goal on a Post-it note, pin it to the mat or pin it to the ground. So every time they want to look at what their lead wrist is doing at the top, whether it's cupped or whether it's flexed, but they're really working on rotation and pressure shift, boom, that Post-it note is on the ground reminding them, Allison wants me to stay on task with this particular concept in mind. That's my goal. We want to use some SMART features, or some of you might be familiar with SMARTer goal setting. It's specific, it's measurable, it's attainable, it's relevant, it's time-bound. When your student comes to the lesson team and says, I want to get better, what does better mean? Let's break it down. How do we measure it? Is it handicap-based? Is it strokes gained-based? Is it scoring average, greens hit and reg, fairways hit? We want to be able to look at the ability to measure it. It's so simple when we think to fitness and nutrition. I step on a scale, I can measure my weight, I can track my calories in, I can track my calories out. We have a goal, we have a plan. In golf, it can be hard for our students because they're not quite sure how to measure practice. So you as a coach want to build in some games, some challenges to have them be able to measure their progress. If they're doing a driving accuracy game on Tuesday of this week, what is it going to look like 2 weeks from now, and did they get any better? Our students will tend, and sometimes us as pros, will tend to fixate on outcome goals. That's the end result of performance. I myself have found myself getting too caught up in outcome. That is making a cut, finishing in first place, earning the trophy. The problem is it's only partially controlled by us as the golfer. I can't control the cut line. I can't control what other players do on the golf course. So then we can look at some types of goals that are a little bit more achievable for me to control, and that's performance goals. This is a specific standard of performance that we can measure, such as numbers of fairways hit, greens and reg, up and downs, putt proximity, bunker saves. And I encourage my students to use a variety of stat tracking apps. I prefer Decade. And I will input my recreational rounds and my competitive rounds into the system. And then I'll set some goals. Hey, in the next 60 days, I really need to look at my strokes gained for putting right now. Process goals is where we can really shine because this focuses on specific actions to become successful. This is the day-to-day, the moment by moment things that you can actually do to perform better. So a process goal could be adding in a box breathing breath before I hit every single shot. Now, the outcome is a successful shot. I can't necessarily control that. I remember seeing Pat Hurst one time in an LPGA major event hit an awesome drive. It randomly struck in the middle of the fairway on a sprinkler head, and it kicked straight into the hazard. She can't control that outcome. She did everything possible to hit a great shot. Things are just out of her control when it comes to the outcome. In terms of process, what we can control is our behavior, our actions, our approaches to how we hit things, how we hit our shots. So looking at either adding in breaths, practice habits, attention and focus, strive and move your students more towards process-oriented goals. And I layer them outcome, performance, and process for a very specific reason, because outcome is sort of like the umbrella. This is where I'd like to go to. Performance would be some ways for us to measure it. Process is what I can actually do. In terms of goal setting styles, a lot of our students focus on success-oriented. This is our social comparison to others. I played better than this person. I'm number one on the team. The problem with success-oriented goals is it causes us to choose less challenging goals because we want to be successful. Why would I want to set a goal when I'm probably not going to achieve it, when I'm going to fail? Well, if we focus on performance-oriented goals, this is setting goals that are relevant to me comparing myself to me. What's my strokes gained in putting in 24 versus 23? What does my swing shape look like now compared to 5 years ago? Has my up and down percentage changed with the best version of when I played compared to presently? So it's less concerned with judgments of success and more on, am I making improvement? It's a little bit of some growth-minded mindset in that as well, as always seeking to be better. Some ways for you to build in the goal setting with your students is to create drills that have a ladder component to them so that the difficulty of the drill continues to increase once you've accomplished a task. So let's say you're playing, an example I'll do for putting is 5 holes. You have to putt a 3-foot, a 6-foot, and a 9-foot putt per hole in any order. And so if you were to make all putts, you'd earn 15 points. So I have my students first try to accomplish 8 points or better. Once they accomplish 8, okay, let's see if we can get 10 points the next time we try the drill. The tour average on that particular game is 11 and 12. So if they can play that 3-6-9 game and score an 11 or a 12, then they're seeing quite a bit of progress in their putting. Ladder increments, we certainly have done this in putting where you've got a 3-footer, 4-footer, 5-footer, 6-footer, and you kind of attain success in ladder increments. This is really great for younger populations. Or Operation 36 is fantastic, where you start students close to the green, have them experience success, and then you move them farther away. Looking at repetition, automation, and then challenge. If I'm changing something in my motor pattern and my swing, I need to do it a lot to feel the actual change. And I need to do it a lot so that it becomes automatic so I don't think about it anymore. Because I certainly don't want to think on the golf course, because what we say is when you think, you stink. If you're overthinking, you're overanalyzing how to move the club, it's going to create a blockage into your automation, and it's going to be more challenging to swing the golf club. So when we're looking at goal setting in terms of a player development program, you put a lot of repetition up at the front of their learning plan. Then it starts to phase into automation. We take away some of that thinking. Now we start to add in challenge. We want to make sure that they're feeling shots under pressure, that they have about a 70% success rate, 30% fail rate. That fail rate is very important. I help my younger students build their tournament program. Around 70% of the tournaments, they have a really good chance of winning, and 30% they have no chance in heck of winning because they need to learn how to come back and bounce back and build adversity. So you want to build in a little bit of that high challenge so that they experience what failure is, but you balance it with great success. Of course, recreating situations mentally. TrackMan combines, flight scope combines are really helpful in that, setting up parameters for success and failure, having a little bit of pressure, or maybe you say, I get ice cream tonight if I accomplish this goal, or I have to do 25 burpees when I get home if I don't accomplish this goal. And my favorite is bringing students onto the golf course to experience adversity. So we set a goal of we need to improve our recovery shots. Most of our club golfers who are a 15 handicap and higher are spending a large percentage of their time recovering. They're not playing from the middle of the fairway. They're not playing with an easy access to hit the green and reg. So we need to have them experience adversity and then overcome that. So I'll set up a development plan for them where I pick 15 different recovery shots. So maybe a low one that you have to cut around a tree, maybe a high pitch shot over a bunker. And we determine what those 15 recovery shots look like. And we start, let's say, on March 1st, how successfully they can complete those shots. And then we look at April 1st, how successfully can they complete those shots. So we have a 30-day plan to see how they can improve recovering from adverse situations, makes them feel like they are gaining some confidence and they're improving, but we're also measuring and setting goals to get better. So then when they hit it behind a tree, they don't feel so angry because they've been there before, it's frequent, and they know how to get out with more ease. All right, moving into our next component of imagery, visualization, and mental rehearsals. I say if you see it in your mind, you can hold it in your hand. Or the old cliche, whatever you put your mind to, you can accomplish. There is some science to support this. Mental rehearsals and observing other people performing actions will actually activate the same areas in your brain as if you were doing them yourself. So for example, let's say you're having a player who comes over the top, they lead transition with their upper body, their lower body is out of sequence. You've created a really fantastic drill for them to wind up properly, feel like their hands are staying behind them longer as their lower body is moving first. Let's say that's the drill that you've come up with. So it's raining, it's snowing in St. Louis. They can't go outside. They don't have an indoor sim. How do you practice? If they were to imagine themselves performing the drill that you created for them, closing their eyes, finding a nice quiet place to rehearse, and they see themselves going through the motion precisely as you have prescribed, that is activating the same cortical areas in the brain as if they were at the range doing it live and in person, which is pretty fascinating because I sort of use this as a hook line. If I could help you get better without ever going to the range, would you do it? And every student's like, yep, sign me up. I'd be more than happy to do it. Well, you can, and it's through mental rehearsals and visualization. There's even some fabulous science to indicate that imaging your biology can change cellular biology. For example, there's been some cases on record of individuals having a tumor, and rather than going through cancer treatments of chemo and radiation, they had a imagery schedule of imagining white blood cells going to the area of the cancer cell and cancer mass and slowly eating away the cancer and digesting it and processing it. And then they measured what that tumor looked like, and it decreased in size. Looking at injury and rehabilitation, if you have, let's say, a sprained ankle, and that's preventing you from going out to the course to practice, using imagery really focused and engaged, imagining the inflammation of the tendons and the muscles and the joint decreasing, seeing it go from red to white or blue. You can increase and speed up the healing process. You can change your cellular biology through imagery and visualization. And the research through pain management and mindfulness is off the charts. For example, John Kabat-Zinn with Catastrophic Living has done a tremendous amount of research in individuals who have chronic pain where there's no pill or anything that they can do to make the pain go away. Through imagery and visualization, after 21 days of mindfulness and meditation practice, you can rewire your brain to not experience the pain at the intensity that it's been feeling. So through all of this scientific research, it's pretty starking evidence to say we can change our golf swing with our mind. We just underutilize it because we'd rather go spend $500 on the brand new Callaway Smoke AI driver, and I'd rather go bust a bunch of big drives at the range than spend 15 to 20 minutes closing my eyes in a quiet space and imagining my ideal swing or imagining the new motor pattern that I'd want to create. To make imagery and visualization really robust, we want to use different perspectives. So face on, down the line, maybe a bird's eye view, maybe from the fairway looking back, and from my perspective. This is a skill as well. So your students may at first say, I can't imagine my golf swing. That's okay. You can practice by imagining what's in your car right now. Or can you identify what your bedroom looks like? Did you make the bed? What color is your comforter? Where's all the furniture positioned? So you can practice forming images in your mind with how your living situation is. You can start to build that skill set and build that connection in your brain where you can start to see your golf swing. I also like to have my students have on their phone their ideal golf swing on video, and they can watch it time and time again, like it creates a mental reel in their mind. And then when they close their eyes, they have a better opportunity to see that. The mental learning absolutely does transfer to physical performance. Seeing yourself overcome scoring a 10 and then coming back birdie, birdie, birdie. Seeing yourself change motor patterns, changing technical pieces in your swing mentally will start to speed up the process when you do that physically. And then hypnotherapy is a really great way to work on building confidence and changing your belief system. Hypnotherapy is a very deep, relaxed state with a hypnotherapist using suggestions to tap into your belief system. So you might have heard of individuals overcoming a smoking habit through hypnotherapy. If you've ever been through hypnotherapy, it's kind of interesting. And if you haven't, it would look like laying in a chair, having a really dark room, having the hypnotherapist calm you and relax you through sounds and their voice. And you kind of get into this almost like pre-sleep state. And then the hypnotherapist through words will start to suggest and identify beliefs about being confident, about overcoming obstacles on the golf course. And then as you come out of that hypnotherapeutic state, you start to have an influence onto your belief system. The best players in the world do have an imagery schedule. It is like going to the gym. It's like eating 170 grams of protein. It's like getting in 250 golf reps a day. Having an imagery schedule and knowing that I'm going to either imagine myself playing the course that I'm going to be competing on, or I'm going to do 50 to 20, 25 reps in my mind of the motor pattern that I'd like to change, can start to really move the needle on your performance. A couple of questions popped in. John's last name, John Kabat-Zinn. He has worked in Massachusetts on chronic pain, and the book is Catastrophic Living. He's a bigwig in mindfulness meditation practices. And can the ideal golf swing be someone else's, or does it need to be yourself? We have a component in our brain called mirror neurons. So we can see somebody else and we can copy them. It's like an infant learning how to smile for the first time because they see the human, the caregiver holding them, smiling at them, and the infant learns how to smile. So it does not need to be yourself. You can certainly use models of other people. However, for a true confidence booster, you would want to then blend that and evolve that into your best version of yourself. So I always have on my phone a star for Allison's best golf swing, or what I deem as my best golf swing. And I tend to use that as a good model. But lo and behold, you look in my photo album, there's lots of Annika, and there's lots of other players in there as well. Some areas that you can image would be the timing of the imagery. So looking at the sequence and the movements of the golf swing, looking at the actual length of time it would take for a putt to roll to the hole. You want to make sure that you're not doing the imagery in like fast forward mode where things are going really, really fast, but taking the time of the imagery to represent what happens in real life. Now, that doesn't mean if it takes me 4 hours and 15 minutes to play a competitive round of golf, that it's going to take me 4 hours and 15 minutes to image a practice round of golf. The night before a tournament, I'll have my yardage book out, I'll close my eyes, and I will image the difficult shots that I might be faced with in that round. The timing of the imagery would be more related to the timing of my golf swing, or for example, like a putt, seeing the putt actually go 2 to 3 seconds long if I have a 8-footer or a 10-footer. On the golf course in performance, we can look at the flight of the golf shot. I have my students pretend they see that shot tracer and they pick their favorite color to represent the shot tracer. In the pre-shot routine, are they seeing the ball from start to finish, the entire flight of it, going the direction and the curvature that they wish for? That is a great way to preset the mind to perform that action live. We talked about the body in motion. We've talked about performance. So seeing yourself play 18 holes, get your juniors, get your competitors to play a round of golf in their mind before they play the actual golf course. Mental toughness training is imagining the worst case scenarios and then seeing yourself overcome them. If you do top your drive on the first hole, can you see yourself hitting a fantastic recovery shot? And then we spend some time on the injury recovery and rehabilitation. I remembered when I was trying to train in a different discipline outside of golf. I ran in the New York City Marathon for PGA Hope. My first step was I wanted to complete the marathon. Never ran a marathon before in my life. I liked running. I thought this was a huge hurdle to accomplish. So reading some sports psychology books in running, I found so many similarities to golf. I imagined the entire course of the New York City streets. I found a video on YouTube. Someone ran it with a GoPro, and I was able to see what it looked like. And then before I would go to bed at night, I would imagine myself completing the race. So step one was just to complete. The next year I decided to run, I had a particular goal in mind of time. So I would see myself run the race and accomplish the outcome goal of that time. Then I started to break down imaging what's the process, what's my cadence per mile, when am I taking my nutrition, my hydration. So all of these different components in golf and in other sports and in life can be helpful for you to perform your best. Giving a speech in front of your club members. I've had some pros come to me say that they're really nervous about announcing the results of the tournament at the end of the tournament, standing in front of the club membership and saying who got first, second, and third, handing out trophies. So we'll go through a imagery and rehearsal schedule of what it looks like to walk up to the podium, what it looks like to have the preparation of the results in hand, and that can decrease a lot of the anxiety and help them perform better. So let's do a little exercise to trick your nervous system just to show you how valuable imagery and visualization is. So I invite you to join me and just sit back comfortably in your chair. Go ahead and close your eyes, and we're going to talk a little bit about some lemons. So as you're getting comfortable in your seat, I want you to imagine walking into your kitchen right now. And you see all the different layout of where the chairs are and maybe where your island is. And you happen to notice that someone just went to the grocery store and bought a bunch of fresh lemons. They just finished coming back from Schnucks. They've laid them out on the table and they look amazing. You see the bright, vibrant yellow color. They even look really shiny, like someone's washed them. And you decide that you're going to go over and you're going to take one of those lemons from the left hand. You pick up the lemon with the left hand and you start to look at the size of it. It's about the size of a small potato. You feel a little bit of the waxiness of the skin. You squeeze it a little bit and it's kind of quite firm. So you know it's just perfect to cut open. So you pull out a cutting board and you grab a knife and you put the lemon down on the cutting board and you take the knife, you position your fingers properly on the lemon and you start to insert the blade of the knife into the skin of the lemon. And immediately as you cut through that first firm layer, you notice a little bit of resistance, but then the smell and the aroma of the lemon just really invades your nostrils and it feels so fresh and so clean. And as you cut a little bit deeper, there's a little bit of juice that kind of squirts out, even enhancing that smell. You finish cutting the lemon in half and you pick up the left half of the lemon and you hold it up to your nose and you take a big inhale and you just feel so relaxed because, wow, it's so fresh. It's going to be so tasty. And then you stick out your tongue and you take the lemon and you gently squeeze it, and 1 or 2 drops trickle onto the tip of your tongue. Now, go ahead and open your eyes for a moment. And in the chat box, go ahead and just put a thumbs up if you could smell the lemon, or if your tongue or mouth had sort of a pucker reflex as soon as the juice touched your tongue. You have a pucker reflex. Yeah, a couple of the pucker reflexes. Interesting because you look around your environment right now and no lemons. Andy was saying it was sweet. Absolutely. No lemons around you. And we tricked your nervous system into believing that you were actually having the juice of the lemon touch your tongue or that you could actually smell it. Now, this only works if you have a history of smelling a lemon, seeing a lemon, or experiencing that. And so through those verbal cues, your nervous system manifested having this lemon in your environment. It activated the same cortical areas as if you actually went and did that after this webinar. So it just shows the value and the promise of mental rehearsals and how helpful it can be for our students. Barbara needs to sharpen her knives. All right, as we get into our last component of our big 5 of psychology, we're going to talk about self-talk. And gosh, I wonder if you were to record all the things that you said to yourself in a given day, in a round of golf, and you wrote them down and you said them to a 5-year-old, how would you feel? Most people tell me that the stuff that they say to themselves, they would never, ever say that stuff to their child, to a junior golfer that they're coaching. So then I wonder, why is it okay for us to be so negative and critical to ourselves, but we would never, ever do that to another human being? Our self-talk in clinical psychology is called a schema. It's the belief that we have about ourselves. We have these scripts and these narratives that go through our mind, and it influences our behavior and our beliefs and our attitudes. And our schemas are developed in adolescence, and they are influenced by our coaches, our parents, our teachers, our peers, the things that have been said to us. There's been a lot of research as of late in how to develop growth mindsets for youth. And rather than congratulating a junior golfer on the win, it's more productive to congratulate them on the effort that they put in to accomplish the win. That way, they don't develop this confidence that's solely attached to outcome. So think about only congratulating your junior golfers every time they won a tournament. Oh, I saw you on the podium again. Yeah, you got your US Kids medal. That's great. And that happens maybe 1 out of 20 golf tournaments. So the other 19 golf tournaments, when they didn't get the win, they don't get that confidence boost or that congratulations from you. They may feel like a failure. And the only way to get your praise is if they win. So we want to congratulate and encourage based on effort. Hey, I saw that you really tried hard after you had a double bogey on that hole. You bounced back with a par. Wow, it was so fun to watch you play 9 holes today. I'm so proud of you for carrying your bag and finishing 9 holes. Man, you did an awesome job of keeping someone else's score. It's really hard to keep your own and someone else's and play golf. So when you start to congratulate and praise based on effort, you can develop healthier self schemas for our young athletes. Our schemas, which are developed in our youth, they start to create more crystal concrete forms in adulthood. So we have some most common schemas like I'm not good enough. That started when we were a kid, and that can be perpetuated into adulthood. Our behaviors will start to support our beliefs. So if we feel like we aren't good enough, it will show up in our practice. It will show up in demotivation. It'll show up in not being fully engaged in practice. And it'll become so unmotivating that it could then lead into burnout if we don't have sort of proper goals that are set. Our attitudes, our moods, our performance states, they are all reflected by our self-talk. An exercise that I'll do in junior camps, but I've also started to do it in adult clinics, is a very simple ball toss drill. So you start with 10 golf balls and you have a player underhand toss to about 10 feet away onto a towel, a golf ball. And as they're underhand tossing that ball, the goal is to land the ball on the towel. And as they're tossing the ball, you're asking them to say really awful self-statements about themselves. Like, I'm an awful ball tosser. This is so stupid. Why is Allison making me do this? I'm such a horrible athlete. Meanwhile, they're tracking how many times the ball lands on the towel. Then they try the experience again, 10 golf balls. This time, they use more positive self-talk. I can do this. That was a great ball toss. I'm getting closer and closer. All right, that one hit the towel. And they track how many balls landed on the towel. And you'll tend to see more times than not, there's always outliers. So this is not a one end all be all, but there's always outliers. You'll tend to see that the individuals who are more positive in their self-talk in doing this underhand ball toss drill will get more balls on the towel than when they are trying to be negative to themselves. So it impacts our performance. It's a very simple performance drill to show this. But just think about your attitude and your mood. If you're having a really bad day, you start to notice that your thoughts circulate around that. If you're having a really good day, you're like, yeah, I feel awesome. Your thoughts start to circulate that. What about if you flipped it? If you were to start off with different types of thoughts, could you influence your mood? Absolutely. If you were having a sensation that you weren't feeling so great, could you change how you felt by using different types of thoughts? Absolutely. By no means am I promoting to have positive self-thoughts because they don't always work. If you have 3 options, negative thoughts, neutral thoughts, positive thoughts, which one do you think is a guaranteed influencer? Go ahead and type it into the chat box. Negative, neutral, or positive? Which one is guaranteed to work? Curious what your responses are. Got some neutrals, some positives, hopefully positive. I am so sad to say positive is wrong. The one that actually works is negative. If you are a negative thinker, you are almost guaranteed to have those negative outcomes. It's very rare that if you stand on the tee, don't hit it left, don't hit it left, don't hit it left, do you rip it right down the middle. It's really hard to wake up in the day and say, today is going to be horrible. Oh my gosh, it's going to snow, it's going to rain, I'm going to get into a car accident, this is going to be awful, there's going to be ice on the road, I suck today, I'm not going to make any money on the lesson tee, nobody wants to take a lesson with me. Are you going to have a fabulous day? Negative thoughts are guaranteed to work. Positive thoughts do not always work. I have had some days where I don't feel so great. I have tried to use positive thinking. It didn't make me feel that much better. The population that you want to be careful about using positive thoughts with are teenagers, because they will see right through you. And there is research to indicate that if they don't feel the positive thought is authentic, it will actually make them feel worse about themselves. I always would get a little bit more upset when I would have a bad round of golf and someone would tell me, it's going to get better. My response would be like, how do you know? It could get worse. My dad always taught me, don't question worse, because it could get worse. The safer bet is a neutral thought. A neutral thought is one that is fact-based. If we have a positive thought, it could influence our performance. It could make us feel a little better, but it's no guarantee. Negative is definitely a guarantee. Neutral is kind of like this safe spot. Just call it as it is. Okay, there's water on the left, there's water on the right. Here's my target. Okay, the ball went left. I can recover. I'm going to try to recover. There's a really great book called Getting to Neutral that sort of describes this idea of negative thoughts and positive thoughts and how neutral thoughts are less judgmental, more fact-based, don't elicit as much emotion one way or the other, and can be quite helpful in terms of self-talk. It basically is calling it is what it is. So it's kind of interesting to look at that. And the sports psychologist in that book, Getting to Neutral, works with a football player named Russell Wilson as he's preparing for the Super Bowl, and looked at the different types of thoughts that would help him perform when he got to the big stage. Here is a self-schema test that I like to perform with my students. So I'd like you to take a moment to just think through these statements, and I want you to think of the very first word that pops into your mind when we say, I am a blank golfer. So you come up with an adjective that pops into your mind. I am a blank putter. So I'll give you a moment to think through those. Now I'll have these statements or a variety of other ones on a piece of paper, and I have my student or client fill in that very first word that is unfiltered. So we're not going, I'm a crappy golfer. Wait, no, I'm an okay golfer. It's the very first word that pops into your mind. That is your self-schema. If you were to have any negative self-schemas, those are the areas that we're going to begin to work on. Our goal is to move from negative to neutral. So if I say I'm a crappy golfer, maybe something that's more neutral is I am a work in progress golfer. That is a bit more specific, that's a bit more neutral, but it's not positive where it's inauthentic. Or if someone says I'm an erratic driver of the golf ball, they might replace it with something more neutral, like I am a working towards more consistent driver of the golf ball. So it's more growth minded. It's not an absolute. It allows for some flexibility. When a student, or maybe yourself, has identified good, okay, or fine, those to me indicate ambivalence. You're not certain one way or the other whether you're really good at this or whether you're not so good at this. So I tend to look at good, okay, and fine as another area to work on to see if we become more specific in that belief system. And if the word is encouraging and positive, like I'm a fantastic bunker player, we know that that's a strength within that person's skill set. So I like using this self-schema test to kind of identify some areas to work on. Now, there was a question in the chat about the amount of words or thoughts that we have in our mind. And one source indicates that the inner voice is equivalent to about 4,000 words per minute. That's your subconscious brain. We have a conscious and a subconscious. Your conscious brain can process about 7 pieces of information in a given moment, and that equates to our typical US phone numbers. Our subconscious, however, which is responsible for 95% of our brain processing, the conscious brain is only responsible for 5. 4,000 words per minute. Holy cow, that's a lot of words. Because the US President's State of the Union address, which is delivered in about an hour over TV, it's 6,000 words. 6,000 words in an hour to deliver. And the human brain has 4,000 words per minute going on. So that's roughly 320 State of the Union addresses going through our head in a given waking day. That's crazy. That's a lot of stuff going on. So if you have a lot of negative self-schemas that are continually running through your mind, it's going to influence a lot of mood and performance. So we want to work that into becoming more harmonious, neutral. Maybe some of them are positive. One way to distance yourself from the negative self-chatter is to work in third person versus first person talk. It creates an emotional distance. It reduces the shame and embarrassment of a particular thought. So for example, if we go into, I missed that 3-footer, I'm an awful putter. By saying, Allison missed the 3-footer, Allison needs to work on her putting, it creates a little bit of a safety and a distance from the blame. When we use I within our self-statements, it's very accusatory, it's very blaming. If we use third person, you're essentially stating the facts. Allison missed the putt. She sure did. Allison can practice to get better at it as well. So just one little tip to kind of combat the chatter. With that chatter comes confidence, because the things that we say to ourselves influences our feelings. So the more that we have going through our mind that makes us feel competent and that we can believe we can do something, a state of certainty, the more we feel confidence, but it's actually a skill. So when we think a particular way, we can influence a particular feeling. And I love this quote from Muhammad Ali, I am the greatest. And I said that even before I knew I was. That's pretty interesting, that the words that he said to himself were so powerful that it created this certainty that I can be the best boxer in the world. And I say it's a skill because it's something that we need to work on through the words that we say to ourselves, through our skill sets, through our performances. And all of that creates this opportunity to build confidence, or the feeling of belief that we can do something. Some ways to investigate confidence would be through confidence profiling, confidence resumes, a SWOT analysis, which you may have done in your business, and then looking at practice conditions. So we'll go through these. A confidence profile is something that I use for my clients where we are inventorying and assessing different aspects of our game. So in the outer part of this spider web, so in this area here, if you can see my mouse cursor, I would have them write down different areas of their game they'd like to inventory. It could be driving, putting, iron shots, could be nutrition, could be mental game, could be on-course tactics and strategy. It could be golf workouts. And then they fill in from 1 to 10, 10 being the highest amount of confidence, 1 being the lowest amount of confidence, how confident they feel. So if we were to write putting here and the player's like, yeah, I'm a pretty good putter, they might fill it in all the way up to level 8. It is a great activity for them to do this personal inventory to assess some areas that they can work on. And it's interesting that people like to do things that they're good at. So if you're really good at driving the golf ball, you'll find a lot of club golfers spend time drilling drivers. It feels great. I am a notorious range rat. I love to be on the range ever since I was a little kid. I could spend way more time on the range than I ever could on putting and chipping. I think that certainly shows now where I have spent more of my time, but I liked to do the things that I was good at. I liked to hit the golf ball. So as I'm doing a personal inventory, I would recommend to that player, hey, the confidence is low as this particular area. Is it a skill set? Is it a belief? Let's come up with a plan for us to feel more confident and improve those skills there. A confidence resume would look as if you listed every single golf club in your bag. And then you were to write down a specific memory with that club of when you were a rock star. What is your best 5-iron ever? Where were you? What did it look like? What were you wearing? What course were you at? How far away with you? Can you see the entire shape of the shot? This activity can take a couple of days as a student is going through it. And I want them to create this resume because we're going to use it when things go bad. So when confidence plummets, when a player's not striking the ball well, we can go back to moments in time that we have felt really confident. And we can say, you remember that 7-iron that you hit back in Bandon Dunes when you traveled with your family to go play that course? Think about the things that you embraced and what you exhibited when you hit that amazing 7-iron. Let's look at some of those qualities and characteristics. What were you thinking about? How'd you feel? And using those memories can help bring us back to reality that we don't suck so bad. And we can certainly get back to swinging our best self. But it's a great way to remind ourselves of where we've come from. And so building this confidence resume can be extremely helpful for players to help them feel better about their game. If you've ever done a SWOT analysis for your facility, I like to do this SWOT analysis for my teaching business, but also for my own personal golf game. What am I really good at? What are some areas that I'm weak and underperforming? Where are some opportunities for me to get better? And what are the threats to me getting better? So let's say I'm really good at driving the golf ball. Let's say I'm underperforming in putting. Some opportunities are I have access to a putting green. I have access to great technology, blast motion. I've got great peers who are willing to give me some insight and consultation. And what are some threats to my success? It could be my time, not having enough time to practice. Could be my lack of motivation because I don't find it as fun. So when you have a student fill this in, you can then start to work with them and say, okay, let's take these weaknesses in the next 60 days and let's come up with a good plan. Let's create some antidotes to the threats that are helping you prevent you from not being successful. How do we make this practice fun? How do we make this more motivating? And then in your practice conditions, we create more game-like training. On the range, we have more opportunities for consequences, boundaries, tasks that we're trying to accomplish. We're getting away from block practice once we've learned the skill, moving more towards random practice. That's where combines can be helpful, or writing down specific clubs and targets that you want your students to practice. We also want to match the interval of what we'd be experiencing on the golf course in our practice. What I mean by that is, when do we really ever hit 4 drivers in a row within the course of 2 minutes? I mean, of course, if you hit one out of bounds, you might be hitting another drive, but more times than not, you're hitting a drive and then maybe 12 minutes later, you might hit another driver. So I'd have a student hit a drive on the range and then go to the putting green and maybe do a quick 3-6-9 drill or an up and down challenge, so that they can create intervals that mimic what happens on the golf course. In the practice conditions, we want to understand, are we practicing motor patterns or are we practicing performance? Motor patterns is going to fall more into that block practicing where we're trying to learn a skill. Then we might try to practice the motor patterns in a random setting. And then we might try to disengage our conscious thoughts and go into performance. How would I hit this shot going through my entire pre-shot routine, being in a engrossed, enmeshed, and fully focused state? And that's going to certainly help us transfer what we've learned on the driving range onto the golf course. As I already mentioned, our students are more apt to go spend $500 on a new driver than they are to get coaching. They're more apt to go get physical coaching than they are mental coaching. But even as you all specializing in the physical components of coaching and the performance side of coaching, you're also a therapist to your students, you're a friend, you're a mentor, you're a mental coach to them. Sometimes our students just have no idea what the mental game is. So through your coaching, share how important your brain is to the process of them performing their best. There's also a lot of negative stigmas about the mental game, like, oh, I'm going to have to go see a therapist about playing better, laying on the couch and talking about my inner deepest, darkest secrets. It's not always the case. Oftentimes, it's helping a player understand what to think about and how to think about it. And sometimes our students feel that other areas of the game are more important. If I spend 5 hours on the putting green, maybe I'll get better. Or what if I change my belief about putting? Maybe I can get better quickly. And build a team around you. You may have little interest in coaching the mental game, and that's okay. Build a team where you have a sports psychotherapist, a sports psychologist, or a mental coach that you can refer your students to. I work with a lot of different coaches across the country who are like, I got the physical stuff. I need you to help with the mental stuff. Cool, we got it. Let's create a team. So know how to add some of these tools to your personal toolbox for playing your best golf. Let's share them with your students so that they can start to integrate some of these components into their performance as well. So I want to thank you so much for your attention and concentration during these last 2 hours talking about these sports psychology concepts that we've integrated into golf. Hopefully you found some value in that. If you wish to stay connected after today, I've got my contact information up on the screen and certainly open to any questions that you might have right now.
Yeah, guys. So if anybody has any questions, just throw them into the chat box. Got a couple minutes left. We can answer some questions. Allison, I had one question. I've heard that self-talk, you can have up to 60,000 thoughts in a day. I don't know what you've heard, but how do you reduce those? Like, what are exercises to reduce the amount of thoughts you have in a day? Because that would add more cognitive load. You just hear a lot of bad things on it. So what's some things you do to reduce, just thoughts in general?
Right. So those thoughts that number is going to be variable depending on whether we pay attention to the thought or not. So with some premises of mindfulness, we can have multiple thoughts that enter into our awareness, and then we can choose to pay attention to it, or we can choose to pay attention to something else. So what happens for the anxious brain is, let's say those 60 or whatever number you come up with, 60,000 thoughts a day, the anxious brain wants to pay attention to all of them. So that's where it becomes overwhelming. Through training of intention and where we want to focus our attention on, mindfulness, breathing, the skills of attention and concentration, we can then choose to pay attention to one single thing at a given time. So there can be a lot of stuff that goes underneath the radar in our subconscious brain, but they don't have to actually reach the surface of consciousness because of our ability to stay engaged in the given moment. For example, if you have a child who's watching TV and you call their name to come for dinner and they don't hear you because their eyes are glazed over and they're engrossed in watching TV, and you've called their name 5 times and you're like, come on, dinner's on the table. Oh, sorry, I didn't hear you. They are actually being mindful. They're being engaged and engrossed into the activity that they're participating in. That's a good thing. Let's redirect it to golf. Let's redirect it to our work. So I wish there was a whole bunch of different ways that I could say how we practice that, but mindfulness and informal and formal meditation can be helpful ways for you to choose what you're going to pay attention to.
Very good. Thanks. Does anybody else have any questions? Go ahead and throw them in the group chat. I don't see any crickets, Allison. You did great.
That's a good
You
thing,
answered
right?
everybody's questions. Yeah, yeah. So, all right,
Great.
Allison, we appreciate your time. We thank you very much. And I think everybody enjoyed what you did today. You know, you were awesome. I learned a ton. I have a boatload of notes here. So,
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Logan, for the invitation. It was great to see some familiar names and faces on the call. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and have a great season. Enjoy the 80-degree weather today.
Thank you, Allison.
thanks, Allison.
Thank you.